The emergency klaxons had finally stopped wailing through Research Station Kepler 442, but Dr. Sarah Mitchell's hands still trembled as she made her way through the lower maintenance tunnels. The containment breach in Sector 7 had been sealed an hour ago, yet something gnawed at her instincts. 20 years of xenobiology fieldwork had taught her to trust that feeling. The tunnels were dark and narrow, lit only by the dim orange emergency strips along the floor. Sarah ducked beneath a cluster of coolant pipes, her breath fogging in the cold recycled air. Most of the station's 3,000 inhabitants were still in their quarters, waiting for the all-clear. Down here she was alone. Then she heard it. A sound so faint she almost missed it beneath the hum of the station's life support systems. A wheeze. A desperate, rattling breath that spoke of pain and approaching death. Sarah quickened her pace, following the sound deeper into the maze of passages. She rounded a corner and stopped dead. There, crumpled against the base of a thermal regulator, lay a creature she had only seen in scientific databases and smugglers' manifests. A dwarf dragon. A Draconis minor. "Oh no," Sarah whispered, dropping to her knees beside the small form. "What are you doing here?" The dragon was barely the size of a large dog, his scales a dull bronze that should have shimmered with inner fire. Instead, they were crusted with dried blood and something worse, something oily and black that Sarah recognized as coolant fluid. One wing was twisted at an impossible angle. The other was splayed out, and Sarah could see immediately that something was wrong with its structure. The membrane was thin in places, thick in others, and the wingspan on each side was noticeably different. The dragon's eyes flickered open. They were gold, bright and intelligent despite the pain. He tried to lift his head toward her, then collapsed back with a pitiful sound. "Easy, easy," Sarah murmured, her training kicking in. She pulled her medical scanner from her belt and ran it over the small body. The readings made her heart sink. Severe malnutrition. 3 cracked ribs. Internal bleeding. Hypothermia. And those wings, those poor malformed wings. She noticed the tag then, a cold metal band clamped around the dragon's rear leg. Sarah angled her wrist light to read the stamped numbers. Specimen 47U. Below it, scratched in crude shorthand that smugglers used, was a single word that made her blood boil. Useless. "You're not useless," Sarah said firmly, though the dragon probably couldn't understand human speech. "You're just hurt. And someone is going to answer for this." She tapped her communicator. "Mitchell to station security. I need an emergency xenobiology team in maintenance tunnel 12C. I found an injured Class 3 life form." The response was immediate. "Security Chief Greg Palmer here, Dr. Mitchell." "Class 3? What species?" "Draconis minor. Juvenile. Critical condition." There was a pause. Then Palmer's voice came back harder now. "Doctor, Draconis minor are a controlled species. If smugglers dumped it here during the breach, we need to follow protocol. I'm sending a team to retrieve and dispose of the specimen." Sarah felt her jaw tighten. "Dispose? Chief Palmer, this is a rare sentient species. We can't just." "Dr. Mitchell, I've pulled up the regulations. Abandoned smuggled creatures with genetic defects are to be humanely terminated. It's the law in this sector. I'm sorry, but looking at your scanner feed, that dragon isn't viable anyway. Those wings are malformed. It would never survive even with treatment." The dragon wheezed again, his eyes finding Sarah's face. There was something in that gaze, something that reminded her of every injured animal she had ever tried to save back on Earth. Trust. Hope. A desperate plea not to be abandoned again. "Chief Palmer, the Draconis minor are critically endangered. There are fewer than 10,000 left in the entire galaxy. Their home moon, Pyraxis, is dying. Every single dragon is precious to their species' survival. Doctor, be reasonable. That dragon has deformities. It can't fly properly. It would never integrate with its own kind. Keeping it alive would be cruel." Sarah looked down at the small creature, at the way his golden eyes tracked her movements, at the way he tried so hard to stay conscious despite the pain. She thought about all the reports she had read about Draconis minor. They were fast, incredibly fast. They could navigate asteroid fields and stellar phenomena that would tear normal ships apart. They were sought after by pirates and collectors across a dozen systems. And they were dying out because of it. "Give me 2 weeks," Sarah said. "If I can stabilize him, if I can prove he has quality of life potential, then we follow proper xenobiological protocols and contact the Draconis Conservation Authority." "Dr. Mitchell." 2 weeks, Chief. That's all I ask. You know my record. I've published 17 papers on cross-species rehabilitation. I've worked with the Galactic Wildlife Federation for 12 years. Let me try." Another pause. Sarah could almost hear Palmer weighing regulations against public relations. Research Station Kepler 442 prided itself on being a hub of xenobiological study. Having it known that they euthanized a critically endangered creature without even attempting treatment would not look good. Fine, Palmer said finally. 2 weeks. But Dr. Mitchell, if that dragon shows signs of suffering, if it can't recover to a viable state, we do this by the book. Understood. Understood. Thank you, Chief. Sarah disconnected and looked back at the dragon. Okay, little one. Let's get you somewhere warm. She carefully slid her arms beneath the small body, mindful of the injured wing. The dragon was lighter than she expected, far too light. She could feel every bone through his scales. As she lifted him, he made a soft sound, almost like a chirp, and tucked his head against her shoulder. Sarah carried him through the tunnels, moving as quickly as she dared. Other crew members were starting to emerge from their quarters now, the all-clear having finally sounded. A few stopped to stare at the creature in her arms. Is that a dragon? One of them asked, eyes wide. He needs help, Sarah replied, not slowing. Medical emergency. She took him straight to her laboratory, the one place on the station where she had full control. It was a large space, designed for long-term xenobiological studies, with adjustable environmental controls and a small surgical suite. Sarah had spent 3 years studying the adaptive mutations of crystal moths from Tau Ceti. Now those habitats would serve a very different purpose. She laid the dragon carefully on the examination table and set to work. First, she needed to stabilize his temperature. She adjusted the lab's heating and humidity, bringing it up to match the volcanic conditions of Pyraxis. Then came the careful work of cleaning his wounds, setting up an 4-drip for fluids and nutrients, and splinting the damaged wing. The dragon drifted in and out of consciousness through it all, but whenever his eyes opened, they sought Sarah's face. Each time, she spoke to him softly, reassuring him in the calm voice she had used with frightened animals all her life. You're going to be okay, she told him, even though she wasn't sure it was true. I'm going to call you Ember. Because even the smallest fire can light up the darkness. And you're not going to be useless. Not on my watch. By the time the station's night cycle began, Ember was sleeping in a heated enclosure Sarah had built from habitat modules. His vital signs had stabilized, barely, and the bleeding had stopped. Sarah sat in a chair beside the enclosure, watching the slow rise and fall of his breathing, and wondered what she had gotten herself into. 2 weeks to save a dragon that everyone else had given up on. 2 weeks to prove that different didn't mean worthless. 2 weeks to give this small, broken creature a chance at the life he deserved. Sarah Mitchell smiled grimly and pulled up her research files. She had work to do. The first month was the hardest. Sarah moved a cot into her laboratory so she could be near Ember around the clock. Every 3 hours, she woke to feed him a carefully prepared mixture of proteins and minerals that she hoped would mimic the diet of wild Draconis minor. Every feeding was a battle. Ember was too weak to eat on his own, and Sarah had to use a specialized syringe to get the nutrition into him. But slowly, painfully slowly, he began to improve. His scales started to regain their shine. The dullness left his golden eyes. He began to chirp when Sarah entered the room, a sound like wind chimes that made her smile despite her exhaustion. Dr. Victor Chin stopped by the lab on day 32. He was a tall man with gray hair and the kind of expression that suggested he had seen everything the galaxy had to offer and found most of it disappointing. He stood outside Ember's enclosure, watching as Sarah coaxed the little dragon to eat small pieces of synthesized meat. Still wasting your time on the broken one? Victor asked. Sarah didn't look up. His name is Ember. And he's getting stronger every day. Sarah, I've reviewed your progress reports. Yes, he's stabilized. But those wings. Victor shook his head. They'll never work properly. You know that, right? The asymmetry is too severe. Even if he survives, he'll never fly. We don't know that yet. I do know that. I've studied Draconis minor physiology for 15 years. Flight is everything to them. It's not just transportation. It's part of their identity, their culture, their very sense of self. A dragon that can't fly properly is like a human who can't walk. You're prolonging his suffering. Sarah finally turned to face him. He's not suffering. Look at him, Victor. He's eating. He's responding to stimuli. He's healing. Physically, perhaps. But what about mentally? What happens when he tries to fly and realizes he can't? What happens when his instincts tell him to soar and his body betrays him? Then we'll deal with it, Sarah said firmly. Together. Victor sighed. You always were stubborn. Just don't say I didn't warn you when this ends badly. After he left, Sarah sat down beside Ember's enclosure. The little dragon pressed his snout against the transparent wall, his eyes fixed on her face. "Don't listen to him," she whispered. "We're going to figure this out." By week 8, Ember was strong enough to move around his enclosure freely. Sarah had expanded it twice already, giving him more space to exercise. She watched him constantly, taking notes on how he moved, how he positioned his wings, how he compensated for the differences in his body structure. The right wing was slightly longer than the left. The membrane thickness varied in ways that would create uneven lift. Any flight instructor would look at those wings and declare them hopeless. But Sarah had not spent 2 decades studying adaptive biology to give up now. She started researching. Not dragon flight, because every paper she found told her the same thing Victor had. Instead, she looked at Earth animals. Birds with damaged wings. Bats that had survived injuries. She studied how human pilots compensated for damaged aircraft. She read papers on adaptive prosthetics and neuroplasticity. And she began to form a plan. The wing braces took 3 weeks to design and another week to fabricate. They were light, made from the same flexible polymer used in spacesuit joints. The idea was not to fix Ember's wings but to help him understand them better. Sensors in the braces would provide feedback, helping him feel exactly how much lift each wing was generating. Getting Ember to wear them was another challenge. The first time Sarah approached with the braces, he skittered to the back of his enclosure, wings folded tight against his body. It took an hour of patience and his favorite treats before he let her slip them on. Then came the hardest part. Teaching him to fly. Sarah had converted one of the station's cargo bays into a training space. It was large and empty, with soft padding on the floor that she had requisitioned from the medical bay. Station Administrator Claire Ross had approved it with obvious reluctance, muttering about waste and folly, but the paperwork was signed. Ember's first attempt at flight lasted exactly 2 seconds. He launched himself from Sarah's arms, flapped his mismatched wings 3 times, spun sideways, and crashed into the padding with a yelp that broke Sarah's heart. She rushed to him, checking for injuries. He was unhurt but shaken, his whole body trembling. "It's okay," she said softly. "It's okay. We'll try again." They tried again. And again. And again. Ember crashed 17 times in the first session alone. Each time, Sarah helped him up, checked him over, and encouraged him to try once more. Each time, Ember looked at her with those golden eyes and gathered his courage. Word spread through the station. Researchers started finding excuses to walk past the cargo bay, to peer through the windows and watch the small dragon fail over and over again. Sarah heard their whispers, saw their shaking heads, felt their pity and their mockery in equal measure. "She's torturing that poor creature," someone said in the cafeteria, not quite quietly enough. "Can you imagine? Making it try to fly when it obviously can't." "It's cruel," another voice agreed. Sarah ignored them all. She focused on Ember, on the tiny improvements she saw in each attempt. The way he held his left wing a bit higher to compensate. The way he learned to adjust his tail for balance. The way he started to understand the feedback from the wing braces. 3 months into training, something changed. Ember launched himself from the platform Sarah had built, flapped his wings, and instead of trying to fly straight, he tilted sideways. His body went into a tight spiral, corkscrewing through the air. It was ungainly and strange and nothing like how a normal dragon flew. But he stayed airborne for 7 full seconds before landing, hard but controlled, on the padding below. Sarah cheered. Ember chirped, a sound of pure surprise and delight. He looked at his own wings as if seeing them for the first time, then looked at Sarah with something like wonder in his eyes. "That's it," Sarah said, rushing to him. "That's it, Ember. You found your way." From that day forward, they built on the spiral technique. Sarah studied the physics of it, understanding now that Ember's asymmetric wings actually worked better in a rotating flight pattern. The uneven lift that made straight flight impossible created a natural spin that, when properly controlled, gave him incredible maneuverability. She adjusted the training exercises. Instead of trying to make Ember fly like other dragons, she helped him develop his own style. Tight circles. Sharp spirals. Unexpected angles of approach. He learned to flip and twist in ways that made Sarah dizzy just watching. Victor came by again on day 120. He stood at the window of the cargo bay, watching Ember execute a perfect spiral ascent followed by a controlled corkscrew descent. The dragon landed lightly on a platform barely bigger than himself, chirping with obvious pride. "Well," Victor said quietly, "I'll be damned." Sarah smiled but said nothing. She was too busy watching Ember launch himself into another spiral, his mismatched wings catching the air just right, his small body spinning through space with a grace that was entirely his own. He would never fly like other dragons. But watching him now, Sarah realized that didn't matter. Ember had found his own way to soar. And sometimes, she thought, the most beautiful flights were the ones nobody expected to see. The alarm started at 0300 hours, ripping Sarah from a dreamless sleep. She bolted upright in her cot, instantly awake. These weren't the standard emergency klaxons. This was the deep, bone-shaking wail that meant catastrophic system failure. Her communicator crackled to life before she could reach for it. All personnel, this is Station Administrator Ross. We have a plasma conduit rupture in the central core. Toxic gas is spreading through the primary ventilation system. Seal your sections immediately. This is not a drill. Sarah's hands moved on autopilot, pulling on her uniform. Across the lab, Ember was awake too, his head raised, wings half spread in alarm. He could sense her fear. "It's okay, boy," she said, though her voice shook. "Stay here. Stay safe." She ran to the command center, joining the crowd of senior staff already gathered around the holographic display of the station. The image showed a pulsing red mass in the core, spreading like poison through the veins of Kepler 442. Chief Palmer was barking orders to his security team. "We need to seal bulkheads in sections 4 through 9. Cut off the spread before it reaches residential." "Chief, that won't work," said Engineer Luis Okoye, his dark face tight with stress. "The rupture is in conduit 17. It feeds into 43 junction points. Even if we seal the bulkheads, the gas will find its way through secondary passages. We have maybe 3 hours before it reaches life support for the entire eastern half of the station. Then we go in and repair it," Palmer said. "Negative. The radiation levels in there are lethal. An EVA suit would last maybe 10 minutes before the seals fail. And even if we could survive it, the passage is too complex. It's like a maze of twisted metal in there, some sections barely half a meter wide. We'd never navigate it in time." Administrator Ross leaned over the display, her face pale. "What about repair drones?" "Too big," Luis said. "And the electromagnetic interference from the plasma rupture is scrambling their navigation systems. We've already lost 2 trying to get close." Sarah studied the holographic display, watching the red mass pulse and spread. Her mind raced through the possibilities, each one worse than the last. 2,000 people lived in the eastern sections. Families, children, her colleagues and friends. Then she saw it. The pattern of the passages. The narrow twisting corridors. The sharp turns and impossible angles. She had seen something navigate spaces just like these. Every single day for the past 4 months. "I have an idea," Sarah said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "It's going to sound crazy," she continued. "But I think Ember can do it." Victor Chin, who had been standing silently in the corner, stepped forward. "Sarah, no. Absolutely not. Think about it, Victor. He's small enough to fit through those passages. His spiral flight pattern lets him navigate tight corners that would be impossible for anything else. And he's biological, not electronic. The electromagnetic interference won't affect him. He's a dragon, not a repair technician," Palmer said. "How would he even know what to do?" Sarah pulled up her own data pad, fingers flying across the screen. "Neural link. I've been training with him using a basic feedback system for months now. It's how we communicate during flight training. I can see what he sees, guide him through the passages, tell him exactly where to go and what to do." "And how does a dragon deploy a sealant patch?" Administrator Ross asked. Luis was already nodding, understanding dawning in his eyes. "We can rig a remote deployment system. Something lightweight that Ember can carry. When he reaches the rupture point, Sarah triggers it through the neural link." "This is insane," Victor said. "You're talking about sending a partially disabled dragon into a lethal radiation zone based on a theory." "It's not a theory," Sarah said, her voice steady now. "I've watched him fly through obstacle courses that would make your head spin. He can do this, Victor." "I know he can." Palmer looked at Ross. Ross looked at Luis. The engineer pulled up a schematic, his hands moving fast. The sealant deployment system would take about 40 minutes to assemble and mount. It's light enough that Ember could carry it. The neural link would work through the station's internal relay system even with the interference. "What about the radiation?" Ross asked. "Will it hurt him?" "Draconis Minor evolved on a volcanic moon with high background radiation," Sarah said. "They're naturally resistant. Not immune, but he could survive the exposure long enough to complete the mission." "And if he can't?" Victor asked quietly. "What if he gets lost in there? What if the neural link fails? What if he panics?" Sarah met his eyes. "Then 2,000 people die anyway. But at least we tried." The room fell silent. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of every eye on her. Administrator Ross straightened up. Do it. Luis, get that deployment system ready. Palmer, clear a path from the science wing to the core access point. Dr. Mitchell, prep your dragon. She paused. And pray this works. Sarah ran back to her lap. Ember was pacing in his enclosure, agitated by the alarms and the station-wide fear. She opened the door and knelt beside him. Ember, I need your help, she said, fitting the neural link circlet around his head. It was a delicate piece of technology, barely more than a thin band with sensors that read his brain activity and allowed Sarah to interface with his senses. There are people in danger. And you're the only one who can save them. Ember tilted his head, his golden eyes fixed on her face. Through the neural link, Sarah felt his confusion, his concern, but also his trust. He didn't understand the words, but he understood her need. Luis arrived with the deployment system. It was a small cylinder, no bigger than a water bottle, mounted on a lightweight harness that fit around Ember's body. When you trigger it, Luis explained, it shoots out an expanding foam sealant. Has to be within 2 meters of the rupture point or it won't work. Sarah helped him secure the harness. Ember stood still, patient, though she could feel his nervousness through the link. Good boy, she whispered. Such a good boy. They made their way to the core access point. A crowd had gathered, staff members watching with a mixture of hope and disbelief. Sarah heard the whispers. That's the dragon? The broken one? She's really going to try this? We're all going to die. Sarah blocked them out. She opened the access hatch and a wave of heat rolled out, carrying with it the acrid smell of burning metal and ozone. The passage beyond glowed with an ugly orange light. Okay, Ember, Sarah said, closing her eyes and sinking fully into the neural link. Let's fly. Ember launched himself into the passage, and suddenly Sarah could see through his eyes. The world tilted and spun as he entered his signature spiral flight. The narrow passage rushed past in a blur of metal and shadow. Sarah fed him directions through the link, a gentle pressure in his mind that told him where to turn, when to climb, when to dive. Left here. Sharp turn. Tighter. Good. Straight now. Down. The passages grew narrower. Normal drones would have crashed a dozen times already, but Ember's corkscrew flight let him thread through gaps that seemed impossible. Sarah felt his exertion, the heat pressing against his scales, the fear that tried to creep in. You can do this, she whispered aloud, though she was still in the link. Just a little further. The passage opened into a wider chamber, and there it was. The ruptured conduit, spewing plasma and toxic gas in a fountain of deadly energy. The heat was incredible. Even through the link, Sarah felt Ember's pain as he pushed closer. Now, Ember. Deploy now. She triggered the system. The cylinder on Ember's back fired, shooting out a stream of white foam that hit the rupture and began to expand. It covered the breach, hardening almost instantly under the heat, sealing the flow of plasma. Get out. Sarah shouted through the link. Fly, Ember. Get out of there. Ember spun and raced back through the passages, faster now without the weight of the deployment system. Sarah rode with him, feeling his exhaustion, his fear, his desperate need to return to safety. He burst out of the access hatch and crashed into Sarah's arms. She caught him, both of them tumbling to the floor. The neural link broke and Sarah pulled off the circlet with shaking hands. The alarm stopped. The silence was deafening. Luis checked his monitor. Plasma flow contained. Gas dispersal stopping. Ventilation systems compensating. He looked up, his face breaking into a massive grin. It worked. It actually worked. The crowd erupted. Cheers and applause filled the corridor. People pressed forward, wanting to see the little dragon who had just saved their lives. Sarah held Ember close, feeling him tremble against her. You did it, she whispered. You saved them all. You're a hero, Ember. A real hero. Victor pushed through the crowd. His eyes were wet. I was wrong, he said simply. Sarah, I was so wrong about him. Administrator Ross appeared beside them. Dr. Mitchell, on behalf of everyone on this station, thank you. Both of you. She reached out hesitantly and touched Ember's head. The little dragon chirped softly, too tired to do much more. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Sarah carried Ember back to the lab. She settled him in his enclosure with his favorite heated pad and a large portion of his preferred food. He ate slowly, then curled up, his mismatched wings tucked against his body. Sarah sat beside him, watching him sleep. The dragon everyone had called useless. The dragon they had wanted to euthanize. The dragon who had just saved 2,000 lives because his broken wings taught him to fly in ways no one else could. Not so useless after all, she said softly and smiled through her tears. The message arrived 3 weeks after the conduit rescue. Sarah was in the middle of Ember's daily exercise routine when her communicator chimed with an incoming transmission marked with a seal she had never seen before. A silver star surrounded by golden wings. The symbol of the Galactic Rescue Coalition. She accepted the call, and a woman's face appeared on the screen. She had blue skin marked with pale stripes and large dark eyes that suggested she was Andorian. "Dr. Sarah Mitchell?" the woman asked. "Yes, that's me. My name is Commander Lyra Venn. I'm with the Galactic Rescue Coalition's Special Operations Division. We've been reviewing the incident report from Research Station Kepler 442. Specifically, the part about your dragon. Is this a good time to talk?" Sarah glanced at Ember, who was perched on his favorite platform, tilting his head curiously at the communicator. "Of course. What can I do for you?" "Actually, Dr. Mitchell, we'd like to discuss what we can do for you. Or rather, what we can do together. The GRC has been trying to solve a problem for years now. There are rescue situations where our ships can't go, places too dangerous or too complex for our standard equipment. We lose lives because we simply can't reach people in time. But after seeing the footage from your station, I think you and Ember might have found the answer we've been looking for." 2 days later, Commander Venn arrived at the station with a team of specialists. They set up in the cargo bay where Ember trained, bringing with them equipment that Sarah had only seen in research papers. Holographic mapping systems. Advanced neural interface technology. Biometric scanners that could track a subject's every movement in three-dimensional space. "We want to run some tests," Commander Venn explained, walking slowly around Ember, who watched her with cautious interest. "Nothing invasive. Just flight trials through increasingly complex obstacle courses. We need to understand his capabilities, his limits, and most importantly, whether what he did during the conduit rescue was luck or skill." "It was skill," Sarah said firmly. "Ember has been training for months. He knows what he's doing." "Then let's prove it." They started with simple courses. Ember flew through them easily, his spiral flight pattern carrying him through turns and gaps that made the GRC technicians shake their heads in disbelief. They increased the difficulty. Tighter spaces, sharper angles, moving obstacles that shifted and changed. Ember adapted to each challenge, his golden eyes bright with focus. On the 3rd day they created a simulation of a collapsed mining facility, a scenario the GRC dealt with regularly. Twisted metal beams. Unstable passages. Multiple routes that led to dead ends. They hid a beacon deep in the maze that Ember had to locate and mark. Sarah watched through the neural link as Ember navigated the nightmare of metal and shadow. He moved with confidence now, trusting his own instincts, using his unique flight style to slip through gaps that should have been impossible. He found the beacon in 11 minutes. The previous record for a standard rescue drone was 43 minutes, and that drone had gotten stuck 3 times. Commander Venn stood beside Sarah, watching the data scroll across her screen. "Incredible," she breathed. "Dr. Mitchell, the GRC would like to offer you a position. Head of a new program we're calling Adaptive Rescue Specialists. You would work with us to develop protocols for using creatures like Ember in rescue operations. And Ember himself would be our first certified Draconis minor rescue specialist." Sarah felt her heart skip. "You want to make this official?" "More than that. We want to expand it. The galaxy is full of creatures that have been rejected, abandoned, or written off as defective. But what if their differences aren't weaknesses? What if they're specialized tools we just haven't learned to use yet? You've proven the concept with Ember. Now we want you to build a program around it." Sarah looked at Ember, who had finished the test and was now preening his wings, clearly proud of himself. "What would this involve?" "You would have funding. A proper facility. Access to the GRC's resources and networks. We would help you locate other dragons, other creatures who need help. You would train them, develop new techniques, and deploy them in real rescue operations. You would be saving lives, Dr. Mitchell. Lots of them." That night, Sarah sat in her lab with Ember curled up beside her. She stroked his scales gently, thinking about the offer. "What do you think, boy? Ready to help even more people?" Ember chirped and nuzzled her hand. Through their bond, Sarah felt his contentment but also something else. A sense of purpose. Ember had found something he was good at, something that made him special. He wanted to do more of it. "Okay then," Sarah said, smiling. "Let's do it." The transition took 4 months. The GRC set up a new facility on the orbital platform above Kepler 442, a massive structure with multiple training bays, living quarters for various species, and the most advanced rescue simulation systems in the galaxy. Sarah moved her entire operation there, with Ember taking pride of place as the program's founding member. The first call came from a conservation group on Pyraxis itself. They had found 3 young Draconis minor who had been rejected by their clan. One had a damaged tail. Another was missing several toes on his rear feet. The third was blind in one eye. All 3 were scheduled for mercy killings. "Send them to me," Sarah said immediately. The 3 dragons arrived scared and defensive. The one with the damaged tail, whom Sarah named Ash, tried to bite anyone who came close. The one missing toes, called Cinder, refused to eat for the first 2 days. The half-blind one, named Spark, just huddled in the corner of his enclosure, trembling. Sarah introduced them to Ember. The little bronze dragon approached his new companions with gentle curiosity, chirping softly. He showed them his wings, his own imperfections. He demonstrated his spiral flight, proving that different didn't mean broken. Slowly the 3 newcomers began to respond. Ash stopped biting. Cinder started eating. Spark came out of his corner and watched Ember fly with his one good eye, head tilted in fascination. Training them was harder than training Ember had been. Each dragon had different challenges, different compensations to learn. Ash had to develop a new way of using his damaged tail for balance. Cinder learned to grip and land using different parts of his feet. Spark discovered that his single eye actually gave him better depth perception in certain situations because he had learned to rely more on his other senses. Victor Chin visited the facility 6 months into the program. He walked through the training bays, watching 4 dragons execute complex rescue maneuvers, each one flying in their own unique style. His expression was unreadable. "You were right," he said finally, standing beside Sarah. "About all of it. I spent my whole career studying these creatures and I never saw what you saw. I never looked past the imperfections to see the potential." "It's not too late to learn," Sarah said. "We could use a Draconis minor expert on the team." Victor smiled and it transformed his face. "I'd like that. If you'll have me." The first real rescue call came 3 months later. A passenger ship had crashed on an asteroid, and the survivors were trapped in a cave system that was slowly filling with toxic gas. The passages were too narrow and unstable for standard rescue craft. The GRC dispatched Sarah's team. Ember led the way with Ash, Cinder, and Spark following in formation. Sarah coordinated from the rescue ship, watching through 4 neural links simultaneously. It was exhausting and exhilarating. The dragons split up, each one taking a different section of the cave system, their unique abilities perfectly suited to the task. Ember found 6 survivors in a collapsed chamber and guided them to safety. Ash navigated a passage filled with sharp crystal formations that would have shredded a standard drone. Cinder landed on unstable surfaces to check for survivors, his modified grip actually more stable than normal feet would have been. Spark used his enhanced hearing to locate 3 people calling for help in the darkness. They saved 23 lives that day. 23 people who would have died if not for 4 dragons that the galaxy had deemed useless. Back at the facility, Sarah stood in the observation deck, watching her team rest after the mission. Ember was curled up with his 3 companions, all of them exhausted but content. News of the rescue was spreading across the galactic networks. Already, Sarah was receiving messages from other worlds, other species, asking if the program could help their rejected creatures too. Commander Ven joined her at the window. "You've started something remarkable here, Dr. Mitchell." "We've started something," Sarah corrected. "Me and Ember. This was always his dream as much as mine." "You know what they're calling him?" "On the news feeds." "What?" "The useless dragon who saved the galaxy. I think it's catching on." Sarah laughed. "He's not useless. He never was." "No," Commander Ven agreed, watching Ember sleep peacefully below. "He just needed someone who could see past the broken wings to the hero underneath. And now, thanks to you, others will get that same chance." Sarah placed her hand on the glass and far below, as if sensing her presence, Ember opened one golden eye and chirped softly. Through their bond she felt his happiness, his pride, his love. He had found his purpose. They both had. And this was only the beginning. The distress call came at dawn. Sarah was in her office reviewing training reports when the emergency channel crackled to life with a panicked voice. "This is civilian transport Star Runner. We've hit debris in the Korvax asteroid field. Hull breach in 3 sections. Life support failing. We have 47 passengers including 12 children. Please someone help us." Sarah was already moving, her fingers flying across her communicator. "Ember, Ash, Cinder, Spark. Emergency deployment. Meet me at Launch Bay 3. Within minutes, she was strapped into the command seat of the rescue ship Daybreak, surrounded by holographic displays showing the asteroid field. It was a nightmare of spinning rocks and debris, some pieces as small as pebbles, others the size of buildings. The transport ship was breaking apart in the middle of it, venting atmosphere and tumbling slowly in the chaos. Ember appeared at her side, fully equipped with his rescue harness and neural link. 2 years of regular missions had transformed him. He was larger now, though still small for his species. His bronze scales gleamed with health, and his eyes held a confidence that made Sarah's heart swell with pride. Behind him came Ash, Cinder, and Spark, each wearing their own specialized equipment. "Bad one today, team," Sarah said, bringing up the tactical display. "The transport is breaking into pieces. We need to extract passengers from 4 separate sections before the ship tears apart completely. Estimated time until total structural failure is 18 minutes. Through the neural link, Sarah felt Ember's focus sharpen. There was no fear in him anymore, only determination. He had done this dozens of times now. He knew what was needed. The Daybreak launched from the facility and accelerated toward the asteroid field. Other rescue ships from the GRC were already en route, but they were 40 minutes away. Too far. Too slow. The Star Runner didn't have 40 minutes. "Commander Mitchell, this is GRC dispatch," a voice said over the comm. "We're tracking your approach. Please advise your strategy. My team will enter the field and begin extraction while Daybreak holds position at the edge. We'll bring survivors back in groups." There was a pause. "Commander, our sensors show debris density in that field is extreme. Standard rescue craft can't navigate it safely." "Good thing we're not standard," Sarah replied. She looked at her 4 dragons, seeing them ready at the airlock, wings twitching with anticipation. "Okay, team. You know the drill. Ember takes Section 1, the main passenger compartment. Ash, you've got Section 2, that's where the children are. Cinder, Section 3 looks unstable, so be careful. Spark, Section 4 is losing power, it's dark in there. Use those ears." The dragons chirped in acknowledgement. Sarah opened the airlock and they launched into space. Watching through Ember's neural link while simultaneously monitoring the other 3 dragons through her displays was like conducting a symphony. Sarah had learned to split her attention across multiple feeds, seeing through Ember's eyes while tracking Ash, Cinder, and Spark on her screens. Ember hit the asteroid field at full speed, and Sarah felt the familiar rush of his joy. This was what he loved. Not just the rescues, though he took pride in helping people, but the flying itself. The challenge of navigating impossible spaces. The pure delight of movement. He spiraled between 2 spinning asteroids, the gap between them barely wider than his body. A chunk of debris tumbled toward him, and he twisted mid-flight, his asymmetric wings catching the vacuum in that unique way only he could manage. He corkscrewed through a cloud of smaller rocks, each one potentially deadly, but his spiral flight turned them into a dance. Through the link, Sarah felt his happiness. Ember wasn't just doing a job. He was alive in a way that made every moment sing. "Section 1 in sight," Sarah reported, watching through Ember's eyes as the broken transport ship loomed ahead. A massive asteroid was slowly rotating toward it. When they collided, the transport would be crushed. "Ember, we've got maybe 10 minutes before impact. How many can you see?" Ember flew closer to the breached section, his sharp eyes scanning the interior. Sarah saw through his vision. 14 people huddled in what remained of the passenger compartment, clutching emergency oxygen masks, their eyes wide with terror. 14 in Section 1, Sarah confirmed. "Okay, Ember, begin extraction." Ember had done this so many times that it was routine now. He flew through the breach and the passengers recognized him immediately. The useless dragon was famous across the galaxy now. His image was on news feeds, children's books, educational programs. When people saw that small bronze form with the mismatched wings, they knew they were going to be okay. "Follow the dragon," someone shouted, and the passengers began moving. Ember led them through the wreckage to a clear area where Sarah had positioned an automated rescue pod. They climbed inside, cramming together. Ember waited until the last person was secure, then spiraled back into the asteroid field, racing the pod back to the Daybreak. On her other screens, Sarah watched Ash extracting children from Section 2. The young dragon had developed a gentle touch, able to calm scared kids with soft chirps and patient movements. Cinder was in Section 3, using his unique grip to stabilize floating passengers and guide them to safety. Spark was working in the darkness of Section 4, his enhanced senses helping him locate people that normal vision would have missed. "First pod secured," Sarah reported. "Ember's going back for the next group. Ash has 6 children ready for extraction. Cinder's got 8 adults. Sparks found 5 more in Section 4. The GRC dispatcher's voice crackled back. "Commander, that asteroid collision is imminent. You need to pull your team out." "Not until everyone's safe," Sarah said firmly. She felt Ember's agreement through the link. They had never left anyone behind. They weren't starting now. Ember made 3 more trips, each one faster than the last. He knew the field now, had memorized the patterns of the spinning rocks, could predict where gaps would appear. His flight through the chaos was like watching poetry in motion. Other rescue teams, arriving now and holding position at the field's edge, watched in awe. "Look at him go," someone breathed over the open channel. "He's not just flying. He's playing." And it was true. Even in the middle of a desperate rescue, even with lives hanging in the balance, Ember flew with pure joy. Every spiral was perfect. Every twist was exactly right. His asymmetric wings, the very things that should have made him a failure, created patterns of movement that were impossibly beautiful. Ash brought out the last child, a little girl no more than 5 years old, holding tight to the dragon's harness and laughing despite her tears. Cinder extracted 3 engineers who had been trapped behind a collapsed bulkhead. Spark guided 5 passengers through pitch darkness, his calm presence keeping them from panicking. "Final count," Sarah said, checking her displays. 47 passengers. All accounted for. Team returned to daybreak. The 4 dragons spiraled back through the asteroid field just as the massive rock collided with the Star Runner. The transport ship crumpled like paper, breaking into a million pieces. If anyone had still been aboard, they would have died instantly. But everyone was safe. All 47 passengers were secure in rescue pods, being transferred to the GRC ships that had arrived to help. The children were crying but unhurt. The adults were shaken but alive. And it was all because 4 dragons that the galaxy had once called defective had proven, once again, that they were anything but. Back aboard the Daybreak, Sarah removed Ember's neural link and wrapped her arms around his neck. "You were magnificent," she whispered. "All of you were magnificent." Ember chirped and nuzzled against her. Through their bond, even without the link, she could feel his contentment. This was his purpose. This was what he was meant to do. Commander Ven's face appeared on the comm screen. "Commander Mitchell, that was extraordinary flying. I've been doing this for 20 years and I've never seen anything like it. Your team just accomplished what should have been impossible." "That's what we do," Sarah said with a smile. The story of the rescue spread across the galactic networks within hours. The footage of Ember flying through the asteroid field, his spiral flight carrying him through gaps that shouldn't have existed, his obvious joy in every movement, became the most watched video in the galaxy. News anchors called it the dance of the useless dragon. Scientists analyzed his flight patterns. Artists created sculptures and paintings inspired by his unique movement. But more importantly, the rescue sparked something bigger. Rehabilitation centers across the galaxy began adopting what they called the human method. Instead of euthanizing creatures with physical differences, they studied them, trained them, found ways to help them become their best selves. The idea that Sarah had started with one broken dragon was transforming how the entire galaxy thought about disability and difference. Sarah received messages from hundreds of worlds. A bird-like species on Centauri Prime wanted help training their flightless young. An aquatic civilization asked about adapting the techniques for their injured swimmers. A mining colony requested assistance with creatures that had been damaged in industrial accidents. 6 months after the Star Runner rescue, Sarah stood in the observation deck of her facility, now expanded to 3 times its original size. Below her, 23 dragons trained in the bays. Not all were Draconis minor. Some were from other dragon species, each with their own unique challenges. There was a massive Corvaxian dragon missing half her tail. A tiny stellar drake with only one functioning wing. Adolescent Thunder WRM who had been born deaf. And leading them all, spiraling through a complex obstacle course with perfect confidence, was Ember. He was teaching a new arrival, a young female Draconis minor with twisted rear legs, showing her how to compensate, how to find her own way of flying. Victor Chin joined Sarah at the window. In the 2 years since he had joined the program, he had become one of its most passionate advocates. 23 dragons, he said softly. And we have requests for 40 more. Sarah, what you've built here, it's changing the galaxy. What Ember built, Sarah corrected. I just gave him a chance. He did the rest. No, Victor said. You saw potential where everyone else saw a defect. You refused to give up when logic said you should. You taught us all that different doesn't mean broken. That was all you, Sarah. Below them, Ember completed his demonstration and flew up toward the observation deck. He couldn't actually reach them through the reinforced glass, but he pressed against it, his golden eyes finding Sarah's face. She placed her hand on the glass and he matched it with his foreclaw. Through their bond, Sarah felt everything he felt. Pride in his students. Joy in his flight. Love for the life they had built together. And something else, something that made her eyes sting with tears. Gratitude. Deep, genuine gratitude for the woman who had looked at a dying dragon tagged as useless, and decided to prove the entire galaxy wrong. "You're welcome," Sarah whispered, knowing he would understand. "Thank you for letting me be part of your story." Ember launched himself away from the glass and spiraled down to his students, his asymmetric wings catching the air in that impossible way, his small bronze body moving through space like music made visible. Other staff members stopped their work to watch him as they always did. Because watching Ember fly was a reminder that the galaxy was full of unexpected beauty, that limitations were often just possibilities in disguise, that sometimes the most broken things could teach us how to soar. And somewhere out in the galaxy, on worlds Sarah had never visited, in rehabilitation centers and hospitals and rescue stations, people looked at their own useless creatures with new eyes. They remembered the small bronze dragon who had proven that different wasn't a curse, was a gift. They remembered Ember and they gave their own broken ones a chance to fly.